Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris. This is a donated request from Intello. It's the Presidents featuring Louis CK. Let's get into the video. Okay, now I can breathe. John Quincy Adams.
Missouri got to be a slave state. That's it for him. John Quincy Adams.
Yeah, so John Quincy Adams was Secretary of State. John Quincy Adams had a big role in Florida.
Yeah.
And he had a big role in that compromise. That was a big part. He was a statesman. John Quincy Adams, fucking fascinating guy. I read his biography. The thing about him and his father is that they wrote copious, really long diary entries, so we know a lot about those guys.
John Quincy Adams was brought into the government by George Washington, made him a diplomat somewhere. But he had traveled overseas with John Adams when his dad was still in the Congress and stuff like that. John Quincy Adams is widely considered one of our best politicians. I think he spoke like 9 languages. He could go anywhere. He was brilliant, but he wasn't a great president. But there are reasons, you'll see. I'll talk about him.
But he traveled with his father to England. He was like the last link to the Great Revolution. Yeah, because he was with his father wherever he went, and he took him to France. He ended up being a diplomat. He was the first American ambassador to Russia. He lived in St. Petersburg, Russia, and him and his.
Oh wait, was he the one who helped them kind of revolutionize?
I don't.
Or was that before?
Remember that?
Okay.
I mean, but he was in Russia way back then, and he'd take like a sleigh to countries that aren't there anymore, like Prussia, and he traveled all over. He traveled more than any like human being back then, and he went across the ocean several times. So like something like 12 times back and forth.
Now
amazing guy, incredible guy.
His opponent was Jackson in this election.
Yeah,
Jackson dominated. He won the popular vote by a greater margin than Reagan beat Carter. It was a landslide victory
but he didn't win the electoral vote
for him. But Jackson, in the Battle of New Orleans, came out and said all the guys from Kentucky were being fucking cowards. What? So then when it comes to the Electoral College, the guy counting the votes happened to be like a senator or something from Kentucky.
That would be Henry Clay. Henry Clay took disrespect to that. Had a problem with Jackson. Thought Jackson was a dictator. So it got thrown to the House to vote. And Henry Clay turned a bunch of the states that had voted for Jackson. He turned states by talking to the people who maybe didn't want to vote for Jackson. He kind of made a deal and put John Quincy Adams in as the president, even though he had less votes. That made a lot of people mad. Clearly Jackson was mad too. But what really made the whole thing sting and stink is that Henry Clay moved right in to working in the cabinet of John Quincy Adams' presidency. Looks bad, smells bad. Yeah.
What?
I was like, fuck this guy. And he just swung like 10 states. Because back then the Electoral College made perfect sense. Nobody in any state had ever heard of one of these guys. Mm-hmm. There was no news. There was no fucking anything.
Now you needed somebody. Yeah, you needed super delegates.
You needed
to
just get your local guy.
Yeah.
And be like,
you go figure it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that was enough for this guy to swing all these dudes in the meetings to be like, dude, Jackson's a fucking dickhead. We need John Quincy Adams. So he swung. I mean, it was
John Quincy Adams was another nerd, one-term nerd.
Yes.
Who just couldn't get, I mean, as a president, he couldn't get, and he got almost nothing done. Partly because Jackson and his people just thwarted every single thing he tried.
The whole country loved Jackson.
Everybody fucking loved that dude.
He was Trump.
So much.
He was Trump.
He was Trump. Imagine if Trump like dueled as much as
Jesus Christ.
Jackson died
Jackson
with
dudes.
something like 12 bullets in his body.
Yeah.
What?
that never left his body. He dueled all the time.
Yeah, let's just go straight to Jackson. Jackson, he's the next
Wait,
president.
he can't not be mentioned, John Quincy.
JQA.
Fuck John Quincy.
John Quincy Adams, well, after his presidency, he was in Congress forever from Massachusetts. He died at his seat in Congress.
Wow.
He died
In the Senate or the House, yeah.
at his desk. He was because his thing, he was a huge abolitionist. He was like the only guy in the Congress willing to be an out and out. The slave states had so much power that they passed a law, a gag law, that said you can't say the word slavery in Congress. It used to be there was a thing in Congress back then called petitioning. Anyone could send a petition to their congressperson, and they had to say it. They had to mention it. So, like, you could send a thing to Congress saying, I want I want retards to be allowed to drive, whatever you would do. I want retarded people to have driver's license.
Yes.
And he would say, he'd have to go, okay, the petition from Shane Gillis, he wants retards to drive.
The honorable.
And everyone would go, I move to table it. And then they just table it. But they passed a law saying you couldn't even mention a petition that said the word slavery, because that's how electrified that it was. Like, we don't want anybody. We know you're trying to get rid of slavery. We don't even want you to say. And they passed it. So Quincy Adams would do it, and he would just break the law, and he would just say it over and over again. He would read petitions about slavery, and he would get sent. Then they would all vote, the whole Congress, to censure him for going against the rules, and he got censured over and over again. And he represented the Amistad slaves and got them set free. Yeah, did you know that?
No.
Yeah, he was the slave ship that was taken over by slaves and was grounded in Massachusetts, I think.
So he was saying the S word. He got in trouble.
Yeah.
He got not only in trouble, those slaves
The Amistad incident happened under 8th President Martin Van Buren.
asked him to represent that. He was their lawyer.
What?
Because they were Virginia slave masters who they were Haitian slaves that they were waiting for, that they had paid for. But he found a way it wasn't like a slavery is wrong trial. It was, you guys don't have a receipt trial. It was like, you ain't got the paperwork, go fuck yourselves. So they were free. But he died. He was in the middle of a big impassioned argument. He was yelling, and he had a heart attack, and he died right there with the whole Congress around him,
Just watching him.
because people loved that guy.
Yeah.
He was a great guy. He was the first president or former president to ride on a steamship, and he used to ride on the steamships with a blanket over him, and folks would surround him. All the passengers would surround him, and he would just tell stories. He was a great guy.
Yeah.
He's also the first president to have his picture taken.
That's pretty cool.
Man, I didn't know any of that.
There's just a part of me that liked Jackson.
Jackson's great,
'Cause
but
he's a
I mean,
dickhead.
and again, to me, I look at all these guys. I evaluate them as characters. They're all great, amazing characters. They all did awful things,
Of course.
Yeah.
but I mean, Obama fucking bombed, fucking weddings.
Obama.
Obama.
Yeah.
But yes, Jackson was a crazy but shrewd. A great thing about Jackson was that his inaugural party in the White House.
Yeah.
This is wild.
They
stormed the Capitol.
He invited everybody. That's exactly right. He
stormed
invited everyone. He said anyone that wants can come. No invitation needed. It's the people's house, and the house was crammed with common people getting drunk,
Just got
stealing
shit-faced,
shit,
destroyed
and
the
they
whole
wouldn't
place.
leave. And
Jackson look, this is a man who was in over 100 duels. Some say up to 144 duels. This is a man who frequently looked death in the eyes, and death blinked. And this man in this moment was just like, we got to get the hell out of there. These people are crazy. So what's that tell you? It must have been a raucous event. What I really... Andrew Jackson's life, I don't like his presidency, but his life is the most fascinating story you could read. It is just Father dies before he's born. 2 brothers and his mom. His one brother dies in the revolution. His brother get caught in the revolution. His brother gets hit. He gets hit. His brother gets some kind of fever, ends up dying. His mother nurses him back. Then she goes to nurse back some cousins. She comes down with something. Or she was bayoneted to death by the British. Most people think it was the other. I've heard the bayoneted. That's the one I believe, because it kind of explains his hatred of the British. Jackson he's an orphan by 12. I mean, the prime example, and I love this one. There was a man, Jackson was a judge in Tennessee, and he is presiding over a case where this man, I don't know, he got drunk and he beat up some people. So Jackson's sitting there, and the cops show up, and they're just like, well, the guy's across the street in a saloon. He won't show up. And Jackson's like, we'll go get him. So one cop goes over, comes back. He's got a busted up eye. He's like, yeah, no, he ain't coming. He just punched me. And Jackson goes, well, take more cops. Several cops come over. They come back. Their shirts are all askew. One guy's, got a obvious fist mark in the face. And they're just like, this guy he will not come over here. And Jackson goes, all right. Calls a recess. Tells the police officers, you better just deputize me. So they're like, all right, you crazy son of a bitch, you're deputized. He then stands up, takes off his judge's robe, puts on his belt, which has got 2 6-shooter pistols in there, walks right on out of the courtroom, and everyone's just like, okay, we got to see this. They go walking out behind him. He walks right in through those saloon doors, opens them up, calls out the man, and everyone now is just kind of laughing because they're like, oh, this guy, he's already beat up police officers. Now here's this guy. Who's this guy? The guy looks over at Jackson and acknowledges, yeah, I'm the guy. Jackson then smiles, pulls both of his guns, points them at him, pulls the hammer back, and says something to the effect of, give me a reason, you scoundrel. Something like that, Give me a reason to pull the triggers, you scoundrel. The guy kind of like looks at Jackson, and he's just like, he surrenders. They handcuff him or whatever they did. Bring him into court. Jackson hits him with a $25 fine and 1 week in jail or whatever it was. It was very minor. I don't even think charged him for beating up the cops. The guy goes walking out. A bunch of the people around him go, you beat up the cops who pointed guns at you. Why didn't you just take that old man? And he goes, because I looked that old man in the eyes and I saw death. I don't think he knew it was Andrew Jackson, but had Andrew Jackson walked in and said, hey, I'm Andrew Jackson and I'm here to kill someone, that guy would have been like, yep, you're looking for me, and I forgot that I should have been in there. Like, Jackson didn't play. If Jackson said to you, Jackson left office, and they said, are there any regrets in your presidency? Now, he did 2 terms. His first term, his vice president was John C. Calhoun, representative from South Carolina. John C. Calhoun was very instrumental in trying to start the Civil War. Andrew Jackson said his only regret was not killing his vice president. He meant it. This is what his former vice president said when he heard it. Really? Yeah, that was exactly what he should have said. Nope. Seriously? Jackson
there's
didn't mess
there's
around.
a honor code in the White House. You don't ask someone to leave. You don't ever throw anybody out. So they couldn't get them. Like days went by where people are shitting on the floor and raiding the fucking pantry and just fucking people and whatever.
What?
And so what they did was they got huge kegs of beer and they put them on the lawn. And they said, "Hey, come out. Let's drink under the stars. Let's have, you know." And they invited them out for beer on the lawn, and they all came outside and they locked the doors. That was how he was a people's president.
Yeah,
Like
he was
there
the first
some,
populist,
in his
first
yes.
guy. Yeah,
First one to appeal to the common person. There was an author, English guy. I read his biography of him, and they have one account of an English traveling writer who would write travel logs. And he was in Washington, and he thought, what is it like? Can you meet the president? And he just walked. There wasn't a fence around the house.
People
then.
just could walk in and
So
see
he
him.
just walked to the front door, and he knocked on the door. And a butler came and to the door and said hello. And he said, "I'd like to meet the president." And he's like, "Is he expecting you?" And he goes, "No." And the butler's like, "All right, well, come in and sit down." And he went in. The guy waited like 20 minutes. And Jackson came out of his office, which was like full of people. And he said, "I'm in a pretty important, like, who are you?"
Yeah.
And he said, "I just wanted to meet you and say hi." And he was like, "All right, can you wait an hour?" And he's like, "Sure." So he went and whatever, fucking signed a thing to kill all the Indians.
Yeah.
And then he came and had sandwiches brought, and he sat with the guy and just talked to him for an hour.
Damn.
He also went, he was the first president, I think, to ride on a train. He took a train. He was the first one to do this, that he went all over the country.
Yeah.
He went up to Maine. Presidents never travel. He was the first guy to do that. Like, he thought people should see the president. People should have contact
Whoa.
with the president.
Real fast, also about Jackson's life. Jackson ran for president his second time. The first time, John Quincy Adams got it. Jackson ran a second time, and he won. It was not a question. When people found out that he had been elected, they came to his house and they told him, "You got elected president." His wife, Rachel, was heartbroken. She did not want to go through it because of the history of those two meeting. She was married before. Her husband used to beat her. She thought there was a divorce. Jackson swooped in and married her. The divorce had not gone through, so everyone considered her, like a whore. Just, old 1800s garbage stuff. Jackson realized the error and then had a private ceremony again to actually now remarry her because the other guy didn't, and then he was pretty much then used that as a reason to file for divorce, saying she had cheated on him. So she was the bad person. He got drunk and beat her all the time. She's the bad person. Okay. So Rachel did not want a public life. She married a terrible person in terms of that, because Jackson loved the public life. But unfortunately for her, him becoming president was too much, and it stressed her so much that she ended up having a heart attack or a stroke. The night that he found out he was going to be the president, he ended up spending the time with his wife, who had just suffered that. 10 days, maybe 2 weeks later, it happened again to her, and this time it killed her. He buried her, I think it was Christmas Eve or Christmas Day was when he buried her. And right as the funeral is over, he basically says, the American people need a president. They don't need someone who's mourning. This country continues, and it needs its leader. He left his funeral and then took the journey to go to the White House to become the president. How difficult would that be?
The Trail of Tears, he flubbed that one.
Yeah, it was
Flood.
Okay, I'm going to argue this. Trail of Tears, we can look back now and say it's a terrible thing. Trail of Tears during Andrew Jackson's life. Put yourself in this situation and tell me that you would have done something differently. You're born. I'm sorry. Let me go back. Before you were born, the 7 Years' War, or as in America it's called the French and Indian War. French and Indian versus the American colonists and the British. Some Indian on that side were helping. Okay? That was 1757, 58 to 64, 65. 1775, the American Revolutionary War starts. Now, Jackson is 11 at this time. So he was around the tail end of the 7 Years' War. But Jackson's 11, I believe, or maybe he was younger. But anyways, the Revolutionary War starts. Well, who's the Revolutionary War? The British, with the help of some of the Germans. They weren't called the Germans, so what were they? The Hessians. And Native Americans against the American colonists, some Native American help, and then the French, with Spain and the Netherlands also sending equipment. Was it Spain? Or was it Portugal? Spain. I think it was Spain. But they weren't fighting. Okay? Now the War of 1812, when Jackson was a general. What do you have going on? You have the British, with the help of the Indian, or natives, against Americans with the help of some natives. What's the common denominator in all this? It is Native Americans on one side and colonists on the other. Now you had some native helping here, but primarily natives with the help of something else versus Americans with the help of something else. That was 3 wars in a 60-year span. Not even a 60-year, 40-some-year span. 50-some-year span. You're telling me then, if you've been through that, Native Americans are trustworthy people to you? Absolutely not. This is a time when in the frontier, going into Tennessee, you needed escorts because they could come out and kill you. I'm not saying what he did was right. Okay, in today's standards, no, it wasn't. But in those standards, that's how you have to judge it. You have to judge it in that time. You can't judge it by today's standards. It's not fair. It's not right. It makes no sense. Oh, he's terrible for what he said 30 years ago. Well, what he said 30 years ago was fine. It's now offensive today. So you can't judge him by that, because when he made that rule, the Trail of Tears, he got the Native Americans out of there. The American people were all applauding. So is Jackson a racist for that? Or were all Americans racist? Well, we were all different then. We didn't have to deal with potential Native American incursions into fighting. And I know people are going to say, well, you shouldn't have been on the country. Okay, but name a country that was inhabited by England. England was not inhabited by British people from the start. It was other people. Same with any other country in the world. Do we frown on Rome because they massacred the Gauls? No, no one cares. No one cares about the people that were wiped out before this civilization started a country. So my point is that it happened. It is what it is. It was accepted then. We can frown on it now. But there was a reason for it at that time. There's a reason for why people looked at slavery. They looked at black people being less than. Well, we don't view that today. And if these people were born today, they wouldn't have those same views. They would have the views of today. George Washington wouldn't be a slave owner today. Andrew Jackson wouldn't be a slave owner and wouldn't hate the British today. He would probably be like the British because he dealt with the British in terms of war. He did. You get my point. I get very defensive when I talk about the past like this because You can't just say, well, that's wrong because it's being held to by today's standards. It's not how it works. Slavery wasn't illegal in the 1700s. It could have been frowned upon, but it wasn't illegal. So I don't hold those people to today's standards when I judge them. This is a tyrant, a rant. Sorry, I said a tyrant. This is a rant by me just because I'm very passionate about that. You can't judge people by a standard that they couldn't live by. I wouldn't want to be judged by this buzz cut if in 200 years this buzz cut is considered illegal. So would people look at my channel and be like, oh no, he's canceled? Like, it's ridiculous. It's stupid.
He was a bit of a flake. He did do exactly what his goal was.
What he tried to do. You fucking flubbed.
That was a bit of a flub.
I just muted my mic mid-talk. By the way, he started the Trail of Tears, but Martin Van Buren, the next president, is the one who actually enacted it.
No, he was not. He didn't make mistakes.
I looked it up. I don't know if they had slaves.
Yeah.
The fucking dudes on the Trail of Tears, they were like, we got to bring our slaves.
Cherokees were the biggest slaveholders in terms of Native Americans, and it could have been white, black, other tribe members. They didn't care. Slaves, it didn't matter. People, Native Americans had slaves. Do we look at them and say the same thing? No, we don't. We give them a pass. Why? Because we don't want to pile on, maybe. Well, they had slaves. If we're going to hold one negative, then we better hold the other in the same accord.
Slaves are available. Folks get slaves. That's just the way that goes.
I couldn't believe it.
But when he was
peaceful natives.
Yeah, that's what the part you don't hear is like the Indians are like, you know what he did to us and what he did to our slaves was even worse.
Our slaves had it real bad on the Trail of Tears.
I mean, tell me about it.
Yeah, but didn't they like share everything with their slaves though?
I don't know. Yeah, they were way better.
It was
Were they like real peaceful?
It was egalitarian, dude.
They were some of those good slave owners. The natives.
There's some story from some big chief went to the White House to meet with Jackson, because Jackson was very honest. He didn't underhand ever. He didn't play politics. He did horrible things, but he just went ahead and did them. Like there was a slave revolt during his presidency where they took over a fort. The slaves took over a fort and just said, we just want out. We just want to be taken to the north or Canada or whatever. And so he just got a bunch of cannons and just lit the whole place up. Killed
bombed them.
He didn't fucking care. So some famous, like a name you'd recognize, it wasn't like Sitting Bull, but it was some big, all of the Indians, all the tribes chose this guy to negotiate with Jackson. And he went and talked to Jackson, just the two of them, and he came out crying and said,
"What?
We're in trouble."
Yeah, he says, "We're not. This is gonna go bad.
Oh,
this is gonna go bad."
No,
he just had his way of thinking about how it was gonna go. He's like, "No, we got to clear these guys out of here."
Also in line with Trump, he was like, "This is where the term mudslinging starts."
Yeah,
it was him and John Quincy. Their election or their debates and shit was. He would just talk. They would talk shit. There would be nasty rumors in the papers.
Whatever it took.
Yeah.
Whatever it took. No, I remember. I have a friend who's a Trump guy who I've known for a long time. I'm not going to say that his name is Nick DiPaolo. But knowing Nick has always given me some insight into the mentality of that kind of guy. Not just Trump, but guys like Jackson. I remember once I was with Nick and a lot of people, and he was and like three Democrats were yelling at him, and he was starting to say crazy fucked up things to them. And at one point I'm like, Nick, you know that's wrong. And he goes, it's 3 against 1. like what do you want me to do? Like he's in and it gave me and then it brought me back to when I was like 19 and I was friends with Nick, and we were comedians in Boston, and there was a pinball machine we really liked playing at this one club. So we're playing pinball against each other. And when it was my turn, I was starting to beat his score, and he just put his hand over my hand so I couldn't flip. And he just looked at me like this, and I'm like, really? And he goes, yeah, I win. I win. I don't care.
But Jackson, was big too.
Jackson was the first. Yeah, he was a football player. A college football player. Jackson was the first president to go like, fuck you, I'm winning. I'm winning this. I don't care what happens to you. We're gonna,
So he also, one of the big things with Jackson, he vetoed more bills than every president before him combined.
Nice.
Also, the common thing was that a new president comes in, you keep the previous administration. You know, you not your Secretary of War or any of that stuff, but you keep all the workers. And a lot of that was because Washington tabbed a lot of people, and no one wanted to look like they were trying to overrule George Washington. Andrew Jackson didn't give it. He didn't give no shoots. He stepped in and just started firing people, and he replaced more people than any previous administration put together. He also did the vetoes. Jackson wanted his people. He was one of the first people. He set a standard.
He hated the banks. He like went to war.
It's crazy that he's on the 20.
Yeah.
It's like a joke because he hated the idea of a central bank. He hated the idea of a treasury. He thought that it should just be folks have their money, use gold, and you trade. And he wanted.
So I think the U.S. Bank at the time, I think it was called the United States, like the Bank of the United States, was up for to be renewed.
Mm-hmm. Is up for a recharter, I think is the phrase. Renewed.
And he just happened to be the president, and he vetoed it.
Yeah, and it was a thing you don't veto.
You can't veto it.
No, but
he vetoed it. So then the next guy, we'll get to him, is his vice president, Van Buren. He takes over. Mm-hmm. He takes over a completely destroyed economy because he vetoed the bank.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah,
cool guys. Yeah. America is made of cowboys and nerds. So
I'm gonna go back because they're now start talking about Van Buren. But real fast, I just wanted to add, Jackson was the first and only president to pay off our national debt. He did not like debt. He made us pay it off, which is another thing that hurts when you look at cuts that have to be made because you have to pull money out of places to put it somewhere. Well, that will hurt the economy. That happened to Herbert Hoover. Calvin Coolidge made a lot of cuts, paid back a lot of the deficit. That hurt Hoover. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is on that aspect. I apologize for making these a lot longer. I really do. But damn, I love talking presidents. Okay, there's a thanks button. You can donate to the channel. You don't have to. You can donate and request videos. They go right to the top. You can still request videos without donating. You know, they just take longer. You can subscribe to the channel. That helps. Give a thumbs up. That truly does help me a lot. The donation to the channel helps a lot, but it really does. The thumbs up helps more for the algorithm and stuff like that. Gets me seen by more people. Hey, you might like this type of content, and that helps a lot. If you don't like the video, then just turn it off. But giving a thumbs down, I hope you get diabetes in the ear canal, and it rots away. And your feet, you get like leprosy in the toes. I don't even know if any of that's possible, but fingers crossed. So until the next time, have a good day, have a good night.